I overheard them prior to catching sight of them. Their words drifted through the partially open door of the hospital room. My trio of offspring clustered in the corridor, murmuring about my belongings as though my life had already ended. The coastal property could bring in no less than $2 million given the current real estate climate. Daniel's tone, forever analytical and exact. My eldest, the investment consultant who evaluated existence through investments and earnings. And what of Mother's gems? That Bluestone Ensemble father presented to her on their 30th wedding milestone has to hold value, Vanessa interjected. My girl, whose spirit was once so gentle until drive toughened it. I've reached out to a purchaser for the artwork assortment, Robert contributed. My junior, perpetually trailing his brother and sister. We ought to act swiftly prior to any market fluctuations. My lashes seemed burdened by boulders, yet I compelled them to part. The barren hospital ceiling sharpened into view, succeeded by the consistent signals from devices that had evidently served as my sole loyal allies during this period. How much time had elapsed? Days? Weeks? My final recollection involved grasping for my spectacles, an abrupt squeezing in my torso, the surroundings spinning askew, followed by oblivion. Presently, I remained still, respiration faint, while my offspring petitioned my existence as equipment affirmed I yet possessed one. And her private items? Vanessa once more. The picture books, father's correspondence, the storage facility. Daniel responded with indifference. We can organize it afterward or simply discard it. No one desires that emotional clutter. Emotional clutter. 68 years of recollections diminished to clutter by my own offspring. The agent's convening with me at the coastal property tomorrow. Robert mentioned she believes we can finalize by month's conclusion if we set a competitive rate. The coastal property, my haven, the spot where I'd observed dusk with Richard prior to malignancy claiming him 5 years earlier. The location where my descendants had constructed sand fortresses and gathered seashells. The spot that concealed numerous mysteries my offspring were unaware of. A caregiver arrived at that moment, proficient in her azure uniform, inspecting the equipment next to my mattress. She peered at the entrance. Your offspring remain present, Mrs. Sullivan? Shall I inform them you're displaying indications of enhancement? I achieved the tiniest negation with my head, a gesture so minute it was scarcely noticeable. The caregiver bent nearer, her words softening to a murmur. You're able to perceive them, aren't you? Organizing already. She modified my intravenous line with tender touch. It occurs more frequently than one might imagine. Families rush ahead. Rush ahead. Such a courteous phrase for indicating my offspring were scavengers hovering, too eager to await my genuine demise before dissecting my existence. Your indicators are more robust today, the caregiver proceeded, recording entries on her device. Dr. Patel will be delighted. He mentioned you were a warrior from the outset. A warrior. Indeed, I had been in the past. When Richard fell ill, when funds were scarce in the initial years, when I faced unbearable decisions. When had my offspring overlooked that? The entrance swung wide, and Daniel entered, surprised to encounter the caregiver beside me. Any alteration? He inquired, his tone adjusting to the worried son he displayed publicly. Your mother's state is steadying, the caregiver answered. Such matters require patience, but there are encouraging signals. Daniel inclined his head gravely, enacting his role. We're merely addressing some realistic concerns. Mom was never adept at money matters or preparation. Dad managed all of it constantly. The falsehood escaped his mouth so effortlessly. Richard had been the visionary, the broad-view thinker. I had been the pragmatic one, overseeing our home finances during tough periods, extending a single dollar into a pair. I comprehend, the caregiver stated, although her inflection implied otherwise. Simply recall, recuperation from a cerebrovascular incident can be erratic. Numerous individuals reclaim greater capability than originally anticipated. Certainly, Daniel responded, not fully concealing his dissatisfaction. We're simply being ready. Mom would desire that. No, what I desired was for my offspring to recall my identity. Not merely Richard's spouse or their parent, but Victoria Sullivan, a lady who had left her own subtle imprints on the globe. Following the caregiver's departure, Daniel stayed near my mattress, examining me with impersonal curiosity, like an evaluator assessing a vintage item. "We're managing all of it, Mom," he stated, maybe observing the faint quiver of my lashes. "You have no cause for concern." My speech organ felt swollen and ineffective. I yearned to shout, to seize his costly neckwear and draw him near sufficiently to witness the vitality still glowing in my gaze. Instead, I remained mute, confined within my deteriorating form. He tapped my palm clumsily. "The coastal property, your apartment, all the monetary unresolved issues. We're addressing everything exactly as Dad would have preferred. Exactly as Richard would have preferred, my spouse who compelled me to vow that certain elements were sacred, that certain commitments surpassed even kin." If only Daniel grasped the reality. Daniel departed soon afterward, reconnecting with his brother and sister in the passageway. Their tones diminished as they proceeded away, already deliberating which furnishings merited retention and which ought to be disposed of. Solitary in my medical chamber, I experienced something surpassing the bodily agony of my cerebrovascular incident. A profound, scorching disloyalty that ached more intensely than any health ailment. My offspring couldn't even delay until I was lifeless before obliterating me from my own existence. I shut my eyes, preserving what scant vigor I possessed, the coastal property. I required alerting someone, required safeguarding what wasn't mine to forfeit, what wasn't theirs to vend. My digits quivered mildly against the pale medical linen, and I concentrated every bit of my vitality on that minor action. The caregiver had labeled me a warrior. She had no notion how accurate she was. That evening, as lunar glow seeped through the slatted shades, projecting shadow bars resembling confinement across my mattress, I reached a resolution. I would not fury against my offspring's disloyalty. I would not collapse in anguish and disillusionment. I would impart a teaching they would always remember. 3 days afterward, as sensation progressively returned to my left flank and phrases started shaping anew on my mouth, I overheard Vanessa in the corridor, device pressed to her ear. "Yes, we're advancing with the transaction," she was declaring. "The documents are already under review. No recuperation anticipated. The physicians indicate even if she regains consciousness, she'll never resemble her former self." A falsehood physician. Patel had merely that dawn informed me I was achieving extraordinary advancement, that with rehabilitation, I could restore the majority of my abilities. "The coastal property finalizes next week," Vanessa went on. "Daniel's overseeing Mom's finances. Yes, we're approaching it wisely. Pre-succession strategy, the legal advisor termed it. Pre-succession strategy. Such a detached expression for pilfering." I sealed my eyes, simulating slumber as she stepped into the space. I wasn't prepared yet. I needed additional power, additional duration to devise my reply. But duration was dwindling for the coastal property, for the vow I had undertaken years prior that my offspring knew nothing of. The following dawn, when my rehabilitation specialist requested me to attempt vocalizing again, I directed every fragment of my determination toward constructing one vital phrase. I must place a telephone communication. If this tale of kin disloyalty and concealed mysteries has enthralled you, ensure to enroll so you won't overlook the subsequent events. What is Victoria concealing regarding the coastal property? Will she mend in time to halt her offspring's disloyalty? The voyage has merely commenced. I must place a telephone communication. The rehabilitation specialist, Jenny, halted midway through extending my limb, astonishment flashing across her countenance. These were my initial lucid terms since the cerebrovascular incident. "Mrs. Sullivan, that's exceptional advancement." She grinned affectionately. "Whom would you wish to contact?" I ingested with difficulty, my throat parched from inactivity. "My attorney." Jenny's brows elevated mildly. "Your attorney? Not your offspring." I accomplished a minor, intentional negation with my head. "Attorney." "Crucial." I grasped. Something in her demeanor indicated she did. Maybe she'd eavesdropped on my offspring's discussions as well. "Permit me to consult with Dr. Patel concerning telephone utilization, and we'll arrange it." 2 hours afterward, following Dr. Patel's examination of me and expression of gratified astonishment at my development, Jenny reappeared with a medical facility telephone. Your physician sanctioned a brief communication, she stated, aligning the telephone against my ear while supporting it for me. Do you recall the digits? I did. I'd committed Harold Winter's digits to memory decades earlier when he'd initially assisted Richard and me in composing our testaments. My digits couldn't handle dialing yet, so Jenny entered the digits as I painstakingly uttered each one. Harold responded on the third signal. Winter's legal partners. Harold, I achieved, my tone a scrape. Victoria Sullivan. A hesitation. Victoria. Heavens, I learned you were non-responsive. Are you okay? Cerebrovascular incident, I verified. Improving. Require assistance. Urgent. Certainly, whatever, he answered promptly. His tone gentled. I've been acquainted with you and Richard for 3 decades. Whatever you require. Coastal property, I murmured, each term a struggle. My offspring vending it. The Malibu estate. Harold appeared worried. I comprehend. This is grave. They don't comprehend. I proceeded, halting between terms to amass strength. Need to prevent them. Crucial. Contact this digits. I gradually uttered a telephone digits that Harold would discover nowhere in my formal records. I'll address it right away, Harold guaranteed me. And Victoria, do you desire me to notify your offspring of your enhancement? I pondered this meticulously. If they realized I was reclaiming speech and movement, they might hasten their schemes. No. Permit me to astonish them. I could nearly perceive Harold's grin via the telephone. Comprehended. I'll stop by tomorrow with some documents for you. Repose now. After Jenny removed the telephone, I sealed my eyes, weariness overwhelming me. The exertion of vocalizing had depleted what scant energy I possessed, but a minor feeling of victory smoldered in my torso. The initial retaliatory action had been executed. The following day delivered not only Harold to my space, but also my descendant Lily, her auburn locks drawn back in a disheveled knot. Shadows beneath her eyes implying restless evenings. Grandma, she exhaled, hastening to my bedside and delicately clasping my palm. They informed us you might never awaken correctly, that you might not identify us. I compressed her digits feebly. Know you, I murmured. My Lily. Tears cascaded down her face. I've been arriving daily, but you were constantly slumbering. The caregivers said you required repose. I hadn't realized she'd been visiting. My deceitful offspring had never referenced it. Harold cleared his vocal passage softly. Lily was anxious about certain choices being executed. Victoria, she reached out to me separately yesterday. I regarded my descendant with fresh admiration. Intelligent young lady. Lily nibbled her lip. Mom and the uncles are disposing of everything, Grandma. The coastal property is already under contract. They're organizing a property disposal at your apartment next weekend. Her tone fractured. They're even vending Grandpa's vinyl assortment and your initial print volumes. The anguish of this disloyalty was tangible. A constriction in my torso that the devices swiftly identified, elevating my pulse rate. It's not correct, Lily proceeded, fury now weaving through her terms. They behave as if you're already departed. As if your belongings don't signify anything. As if your desires don't signify anything. Harold advanced nearer. Victoria, I've contacted the digits you provided. The individual was quite alarmed. He's arriving by air tomorrow. A surge of alleviation enveloped me. He was arriving. Good. Lily, I murmured, a concept emerging. Require your assistance. She bent nearer. Whatever, Grandma. Pretend you unaware. I'm conscious. Observe them. Inform back. Harold appeared worried. Victoria, maybe a more straightforward method. I negated firmly with my head. Want to learn how far they'll proceed. Lily inclined her head, resolve firming her traits. I'll continue visiting you covertly. They scarcely observe what I do regardless. One additional thing I appended, my tone fortifying mildly with rehearsal. Require mobile device. Confidential. Harold extended into his portfolio. I foresaw that. He revealed a basic smartphone. It's already configured with my digits, Lily's, and the associate you solicited. Fundamental operations only, large font for simpler viewing. Lily accepted the device, demonstrating how to utilize the vocal directive function that would offset my still awkward digits. "I'll conceal it in your hydration container compartment when I depart," she murmured. The caregivers never inspect there. As they ready to depart, Harold hesitated. "Victoria, there's something additional you should learn. Daniel has been posing inquiries at the Regional Records Bureau. Evidently, there's something peculiar about the coastal property deed that's postponing the transaction." A minor grin pulled at my mouth. So, they were uncovering that matters weren't as uncomplicated as they'd presumed. "Good," I murmured. After they departed, I reclined against the cushions, intellectual exhaustion overpowering me. The bodily impacts of the cerebrovascular incident were demanding enough, but this disloyalty by my own offspring sliced more profoundly than any health condition. I drifted into a restless slumber. Visions saturated with splintered recollections. A vow undertaken years prior. Richard inclining his head in endorsement as I endorsed papers. The coastal property keys being positioned in hands that weren't my offspring's. "Mrs. Sullivan, you have guests." The caregiver's tone drew me from slumber. I parted my eyes to discover all three of my offspring positioned at the base of my mattress. Their countenances a meticulously arranged blend of worry and gravity. "She appears improved today," Vanessa remarked clinically. "More hue." "The physician says these variations are standard," Daniel answered. "It doesn't signify real enhancement." I maintained my countenance lax, my gaze unfocused, enacting the role of the partially aware patient they anticipated. Through scarcely parted lids, I scrutinized them. Daniel in his custom-fitted attire, verifying his timepiece restlessly. Vanessa navigating her device amid staged looks at me. Robert fidgeting uneasily, the sole one displaying a trace of authentic unease. "Mom," Daniel stated loudly, as if loudness could breach neurological impairment. "We're handling everything. The residence is being vended to a delightful household. They have youngsters who will relish the shore just as we did." Deceiver. The delightful household was undoubtedly one of the property development firms that had been attempting to obtain seaside estates in that region for years. "We've also organized for your belongings to be appropriately managed," Vanessa supplemented. "Some articles will go to kin who will cherish them." By kin, she meant herself. I was positive. Vanessa had always desired my adornments, particularly the items Richard had bestowed upon me. Robert eventually vocalized, his tone gentler than his brother and sisters. "Mom, if you can perceive me, I hope we're executing what you'd desire." A glimmer of uncertainty in his inflection. Maybe there was still optimism for my junior. They lingered only 15 minutes. Their duty accomplished. As they exited in sequence, I overheard Daniel's device signal in the corridor. "What do you imply there's an issue with the deed?" His tone escalated in exasperation. "That's unfeasible. My parents possessed that residence for 3 decades. I grinned faintly as their tones faded. The mechanisms of fairness were commencing to operate. The following morning, I awoke to discover a message on my concealed device. "Landed in LA, convening with Harold initially. Will arrive at medical facility this afternoon. Remain resilient. David." David. Merely viewing his name delivered solace, like a flotation device in the turbulent ocean my existence had become. My offspring didn't know of him. Had never troubled to discover about the vows I'd upheld beyond our direct kin circle. Jenny arrived for my rehabilitation session. Her upbeat vitality a pleasant diversion from my distressed reflections. "You're performing exceptionally well, Mrs. Sullivan," she remarked as I triumphantly elevated my right limb overhead. "Dr. Patel says you're advancing quicker than anticipated." "Motivated," I answered, finding it simpler to form individual terms than full phrases. "I can observe that." Jenny assisted me in sitting upright on the mattress edge. "Is it the residence? I couldn't avoid overhearing your son in the corridor yesterday. He seemed distressed about some estate deed." I inclined my head, thankful for her insightfulness. "Coastal property, not what they believe." Jenny grinned conspiratorially. "Good for you possessing a few mysteries in reserve. Nothing amiss with astonishing those who undervalue you." We labored for an hour on fundamental actions, sitting without aid, grasping objects, even a few hesitant strides with a support frame. By the conclusion, I was fatigued but victorious. I was reclaiming command of my form segment by agonizing segment. After midday meal, Lily messaged Mom and Uncle Daniel having urgent convening with their legal advisor. Something about difficulties with the deed examination. Uncle Robert appearing anxious. We'll update later. I grinned at the device display. My offspring were uncovering that their rushed estate seizure wasn't proceeding as seamlessly as planned. The deed examination would have disclosed what they never suspected, that the coastal property wasn't lawfully mine to vend. It hadn't been for 8 years. At exactly 3 o'clock, there was a gentle tap at my entrance. When it parted, my heart expanded at the vision of the youthful man positioned there. Health textbooks secured under one limb, shadows beneath his compassionate eyes implying he'd arrived directly from a nocturnal journey. Victoria, David Mitchell stated softly, traversing the space to clasp my palm. I arrived as soon as I learned. I compressed his digits, tears accumulating in my eyes. David, thank you. He drew a seat near my bedside, placing his texts aside. At 28, he resembled his mother so much. Sarah's identical reflective eyes, the identical resolute jawline. But there was something of his father, too, in the tender manner he held my palm, cautious of the intravenous tube. Harold informed me what's occurring. He stated, his tone low with restrained fury. Your offspring are vending the coastal property. My coastal property. I inclined my head, alleviation flowing through me that he was present, that I wasn't combating this struggle solitary. They unaware, I managed to clarify. Never informed them that you transferred me the residence after Mom passed. David negated with his head in incredulity. That it's been under my name for 8 years. How could they not comprehend? Richard and I decided superior that way. It was draining to vocalize, but I needed David to grasp. Kids already begrudged funds. We provided your mother for your schooling. David's countenance softened with ancient ache. I recall the disputes when they discovered you were assisting with my health education costs. They never comprehended. I murmured. Sarah was like sibling to me. Vowed her I'd assist you. And you did. David's tone cracked mildly. More than assist. You provided me stability, a future. That residence is the only genuine resource I possess. It's what permitted me to concentrate on my training instead of fretting about obligations like my peers. I inclined my head, recollecting the day Richard and I had reached the resolution. Our offspring had been enraged when they uncovered we were squandering kin funds aiding Sarah with David's schooling after her malignancy identification. They'd never grasped the profundity of my companionship with Sarah. How we'd supported each other through all. My early losses, her separation, my offspring's challenging adolescent periods, her malignancy struggle. When Sarah departed, I'd vowed to guide David through health education. Richard and I had deliberated it extensively, concerned about our own offspring's escalating materialism. The coastal property resolution had been Richard's concept. Place it under David's name. Allow him to utilize it as security if necessary. Guarantee he had stability while chasing his aspiration of becoming a physician like his father. We'd maintain utilizing it as kin, but the possession would shield both David and the estate from our offspring's increasing sense of privilege. What are you planning to do? David inquired, returning me to the current. I grinned faintly. Observe them uncover. They can't vend what isn't theirs. The agent contacted me yesterday, David stated. Evidently, my name emerged on the deed examination. She was very perplexed. Daniel will be more than perplexed, I answered. A trace of my former vitality returning. He'll be enraged. As if invoked by our discussion, the entrance flung open. Daniel positioned there, his usually calm countenance reddened with fury, a folder gripped in his palm. Behind him lingered Robert, appearing uneasy, and a lady I didn't recognize, probably their legal advisor. Mom, Daniel barked, overlooking in his rage that he supposedly believed me non-responsive. What in the world is happening with the coastal property? His gaze then registered David seated beside me and bewilderment crossed his face. Who are you? David rose, extending his palm professionally. David Mitchell, I believe you're attempting to vend my residence. Daniel disregarded the proffered palm. Your residence? That's absurd. That coastal property has been in our kin for decades. And 8 years prior, your mother and father conveyed ownership to me, David answered serenely. Completely lawful, appropriately recorded, and filed with the region. The legal advisor advanced. Mr. Sullivan, maybe we should deliberate this outside. No. Daniel interrupted her. I want to hear from Mom. Mom, can you perceive me? Did you give away our coastal property to this outsider? I looked directly at my son, abandoning the pretense of partial consciousness. Not outsider, I said distinctly. David, Sarah's son. Daniel's face slackened with shock. Whether from hearing me vocalize or from my confirmation of David's assertion, I couldn't discern. Robert moved nearer to the mattress. Mom, you're conscious. You comprehend us? I inclined my head slowly. Everything. Heard everything. Vending my belongings, petitioning while I'm still breathing. Robert had the decency to appear ashamed, his gaze dropping to the floor. Daniel, however, recovered swiftly. Mom, you're confused. The cerebrovascular incident has impacted your recollection. We're just overseeing your matters while you mend. As for this coastal property situation, there's clearly been some error. No error, I interjected. Each term stronger than the previous. David possesses residence. My resolution. Richard's resolution. 8 years prior. The legal advisor cleared her vocal passage. I've examined the records. Mr. Sullivan. The ownership conveyance appears entirely valid. Your mother and father conveyed ownership to Mr. Mitchell in 2017, retaining lifelong utilization privileges. Daniel's face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. Why would they give away our kin vacation residence to some welfare recipient? David tensed beside me, but preserved his poise. I'm hardly a welfare recipient, Mr. Sullivan. I'm a surgical trainee at Massachusetts General, and your parents had their motives, which they were gracious enough to share with me, if not with you. Get out, Daniel barked. This is a kin matter. Actually, David answered, since it concerns my estate, I believe I have every privilege to be here. The impasse was disrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patel, who absorbed the strained scene with a scowl. What's occurring here? Mrs. Sullivan requires repose, not agitation. Her vital pressure is already heightened. We're departing, Robert said quickly, grasping his brother's limb. We'll resume this deliberation later. As they turned to depart, Daniel looked back at me, disloyalty and scheming competing in his gaze. This isn't concluded, Mom. Whatever you think you executed with that residence, we'll rectify it. After they departed, Dr. Patel checked my indicators, his expression concerned. Attempt to evade excitement, Mrs. Sullivan. Your recuperation is advancing well, but tension can cause regressions. When we were solitary again, David sank back into the seat beside me. That proceeded about as anticipated. Worst to arrive, I forecasted, feeling oddly invigorated despite the clash. Wait until they learn about remainder of it. David elevated an eyebrow. The monthly disbursements, the trust fund stipulations. I inclined my head. Everything they don't merit your safeguarding, David said softly. Not after how they've conducted themselves. Not safeguarding them, I elucidated. Instructing them. Lesson long delayed. As the afternoon sunlight angled through the medical shades, casting amber illumination across the barren space, I felt a sense of lucidity I hadn't encountered in years. My offspring needed to learn that there were repercussions to their actions, that the world didn't revolve around their anticipations and desires, and I would be the one to instruct them, one agonizing disclosure at a time. News spreads rapidly in families, particularly when succession is involved. By dusk, Vanessa had charged into my medical chamber, luxury handbag oscillating wildly, face reddened with outrage. What is this madness about the coastal property? She demanded without introduction. Daniel says you donated it away. To an outsider. David had stepped out for beverage, leaving me momentarily solitary. A fortunate timing that spared us another immediate clash. Not outsider, I answered, finding my tone stronger after a day of rehearsal. David, Sarah's son. Your companion's child? Vanessa's tone rose incredulously. The one you squandered all that funds on for health education. Mom, have you gone mad? I regarded my daughter calmly. At 42, Vanessa possessed her father's striking traits, but none of his empathy. Somewhere between the exclusive academies and social clubs, she'd lost the soft spirit I once knew. My funds, I reminded her. My selection. It wasn't merely your funds. It was our kin heritage. Dad labored his whole existence building that collection, and you've been donating it away to individuals who aren't even connected to us. I negated slowly with my head. Sarah was kin. Not by lineage. By selection. Selection? Vanessa derided. We're your genuine kin. Your offspring, your blood and flesh, and you've betrayed us for some arbitrary child. The entrance parted and Lily entered stealthily, freezing when she saw her mother. I hadn't anticipated her. She usually arrived in the mornings when her mother was at exercise class. Mom. Lily looked between us swiftly, evaluating the situation. I just came to deliver Grandma some proper nourishment. The medical facility fare is awful. Vanessa turned on her daughter. Did you comprehend this? About the coastal property? Lily's countenance remained impressively impartial. Comprehend what? That your grandmother donated away our coastal property years prior to her companion's son, that charming retreat residence that should have been part of your succession someday. Gone. I watched my descendant carefully. We hadn't discussed this specific detail during her visits. Lily hesitated, then straightened her posture. I knew Grandma assisted David Mitchell with health education. She informed me about it last year when I was considering pre-health. This was news to me. Lily had never mentioned interest in medicine. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You've been conversing with her about this without our knowledge? Not without anyone's knowledge, Lily answered evenly. I just requested her for guidance about my future, something you and Dad never seemed to have time for. The jab struck true, and Vanessa recoiled slightly before recovering. We're deviating. The point is, your grandmother has made a terrible error, possibly due to her condition. We're going to rectify it. Nothing to rectify, I interjected. Lawful, appropriate, my resolution. A resolution you never discussed with your own offspring. Vanessa's tone cracked with feeling. The first authentic emotion I'd heard from her in days. Would you have comprehended? I asked softly. You never gave us the opportunity, she answered. And for a moment, beneath the fury, I glimpsed hurt. Real hurt. Perhaps I had misjudged. Perhaps underneath the materialism and privilege, my offspring genuinely felt betrayed by my secrecy, not just deprived of a resource. The moment passed swiftly. Vanessa straightened, smoothing her flawless top. It doesn't matter. Daniel's already consulting with another legal advisor. There must be bases to contest this diminished ability in proper sway, something. And just like that, any compassion I'd felt vanished. Not a term about my recuperation, about how I was feeling, about what I might require. Only tactics to undo my resolutions and claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Good fortune, I said simply. The entrance parted again, and David entered with 2 beverage containers. He stopped abruptly at the sight of Vanessa, his expression carefully impartial. I didn't realize you had company. I can return. No need, Vanessa said coldly, gathering her bag. I was just departing. She turned to me, eyes firm. This discussion isn't concluded, Mom. After she departed, Lily exhaled unsteadily. That was intense. David handed me one of the beverage containers, which I accepted gratefully. Your mother, I presume, he asked Lily. She inclined her head. That was one of her more controlled displays, believe it or not. I took a careful sip of the beverage, my first since the cerebrovascular incident. Rich and revitalizing. Lily interested in medicine, I told David. He turned to my descendant with genuine curiosity. Really? What field? Lily blushed slightly. I'm just exploring options, but possibly child care or elder care. I like working with individuals who actually require assistance. The subtle criticism at her kin's materialistic focus wasn't lost on me. Lily had always been different, more reflective, more sincere. In many ways, she reminded me of myself at that age before life had complicated everything. We should converse, David offered. I could inform you about my training experience, the realities of health education. It's fulfilling but demanding. I'd like that, Lily answered with unexpected enthusiasm. Watching them, I felt a strange sense of continuity, as if something important was being preserved despite my offspring's best efforts to dismantle my heritage. Perhaps the connections that mattered most weren't the ones defined by genetics after all. Grandma, Lily said, turning back to me. I brought you something. She extracted a small image collection from her satchel. I rescued it from the containers Uncle Daniel was packing from your apartment. I thought you might want to retain it. She placed it in my lap, and I recognized it immediately. The small azure collection where I'd kept images of Sarah and me throughout our 40-year companionship. Sarah at my marriage. Me at her son's birth. Both of us, arms encircling each other at her 50th birthday, a year before her diagnosis. Sarah slender, but grinning during treatment. My palm clasping hers. Tears accumulated in my eyes. "Thank you," I murmured. David peered at the collection, his expression softening. "I haven't seen some of these in years." Mom retained the same ones. He pointed to an image of Sarah and me on the shore, both in our 30s, chuckling as waves crashed around our knees. The very shore where the disputed residence stood. "She adored that place," David said quietly. "Even before you owned it. Remember how we used to lease the cottage 3 residences down every summer? Mom would say someday she'd have her own place there." I inclined my head, memory enveloping me. That's why we acquired it for her to visit. When she fell ill, wanted her to have serene place. Lily was listening intently, absorbing this history she'd never heard. So the coastal property was special to Sarah too. Very, I confirmed. After diagnosis, she resided there last summer of her life. David swallowed with difficulty. It was the last place she felt truly content. When you conveyed it to me after she passed, it meant everything, not just monetarily, but sentimentally. My offspring never knew her like I did, I explained to Lily. Never understood our companionship. Because they never inquired, Lily concluded quietly. They just assumed it was their succession. They're correct. Yes. I reached for Lily's palm. You different. See beyond belongings. She squeezed my digits gently. I should depart before Mom wonders where I am, but I'll return tomorrow. After she departed, David helped me examine more of the collection. Each image unlocking memories, camping excursions with our young offspring, holiday festivities, Sarah standing as sponsor at Vanessa's baptism, a role my daughter had apparently forgotten. Your offspring really have no idea, do they? David asked. About everything you and Mom shared. About the vows you made to each other. No, I admitted. My fault partly. Shielded them too much. Never showed them. Real world. And now they're vending off your life without a second thought. There was no judgment in his tone. Only sorrow. Not everything. I corrected. A small grin forming. Coastal property just commencement. Wait until they attempt to access bank records. David raised an eyebrow. You have more surprises in store. Many, I confirmed. Richard and I planned carefully. Suspected this might occur someday. You knew your own offspring would try to liquidate your assets while you were in the medical facility. The disbelief in his voice was palpable. Hoped not, I clarified. Prepared just in case. Richard saw indications. Their focus on money, belongings. Worried what would happen if I was solitary. David negated slowly with his head. And they think you were the monetarily naive one. As evening approached, Harold arrived with documents for me to review, papers that would make my recuperation official, my competency established, my authority over my own affairs restored. The neurologist will evaluate you tomorrow, he explained. Once he confirms your cognitive functions are intact, we can file these immediately. I inclined my head gratefully. And the other matter. In progress, Harold assured me. The funds are secure. Your offspring cannot access them without the proper documentation which only you possess. Good. I settled back against the pillows, exhaustion creeping in, but determination burning bright. Let them vend what they can. Each transaction one step closer to the truth. Harold patted my palm gently. Repose now, Victoria. The elements are in motion. As I drifted towards slumber that night, I thought of Richard, of the discussions we'd had during his final months. How he'd worried about our offspring's values, about the heritage we would leave. How we'd agreed that true succession wasn't measured in estate or bank records, but in lessons learned and wisdom gained. Our offspring had missed those lessons. Perhaps in my imperfect way, I could still instruct them, even if the education came through loss rather than affection. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of ideal Southern California day that usually elevated my mood. But as I sat in the mobility chair by my medical window, a heaviness pressed against my torso that had nothing to do with my health condition. Today was the property disposal at my apartment. Today, outsiders would sift through my belongings, bargaining over costs, departing with fragments of my existence clutched in their hands. "Are you certain you want to do this?" David asked, standing behind my mobility chair. "It's not too late to halt it." I negated firmly with my head. Need to witness. Need to learn. Dr. Patel had cleared me for a brief excursion, 4 hours maximum, with David, a trained health professional, accompanying me. My offspring knew nothing of this approval, nothing of my planned visit to the very disposal they had organized. "Your vital pressure," David reminded me. "If you become too distressed." "I'll be fine," I assured him. My speech improving daily with therapy. "Just observe. No clash." "Not yet." He didn't appear convinced, but inclined his head anyway. "Harold will meet us there, and Lily knows we're arriving." The medical facility release was surprisingly simple. Within 30 minutes, I was settled in David's leased vehicle, a cushion supporting my weaker side, heading toward the seaside apartment that had been my dwelling since Richard's passing. As we approached my neighborhood, I noticed the indicators first: bright posters with dark arrows, the words, "Property disposal, all must depart," in flashy lettering. Like a clearance at a failing enterprise. Like my existence was being cleared out for stock. "Vulgar," I murmured. David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We don't have to do this." "Yes," I insisted. "We do." He parked a block away to avoid the cluster of vehicles already lining my street. As he helped me into the mobility chair, I caught sight of a woman walking away from my building, carrying Richard's antique game set, the one his father had given him, the one he'd planned to pass to his first grandchild. I swallowed with difficulty, forcing down the wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm me. David wheeled me slowly toward the apartment building, where a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. Most were strangers, clutching beverage cups and numbered tickets, waiting for their turn to enter. Property disposal scavengers, I'd always called them. The regulars who showed up early, who knew the best items would go first. We joined the queue, David pulling my sun hat lower over my face. No one gave us a second glance. Just another elderly woman in a mobility chair, perhaps looking for bargains like everyone else. When our number was called, we entered the elevator to my floor. As the doors opened on the 12th story, the sounds hit me first. Voices bargaining, compartments opening and closing, the particular rustle of people examining items that don't belong to them. Then the sight, my front entrance standing open, strangers wandering freely through rooms that had been my private sanctuary. And in the center of it all, Vanessa and Daniel overseeing the dismantling of my life with clipboards and calculating eyes. "Price verification on the metallic service," someone called. $800 for the collection, Daniel replied without hesitation. "But we'll accept $7 if you're purchasing today." $700 for the Georgian metallic that had been in Richard's kin for 4 generations. The service we'd agreed would go to Robert's offspring when they wed. A middle-aged woman held up my cream wool garment. "How much for this?" $40, Vanessa answered, barely glancing up from her clipboard. All apparel is as marked. My favorite garment, the one Richard had given me our last holiday together. Now reduced to a price tag in a stranger's hands. David squeezed my shoulder gently. "We can depart," he whispered. I negated with my head, forcing myself to breathe evenly. This was why I had come, to witness, to remember, to fuel the resolve that would carry me through what was to come. We moved through the crowded rooms, unnoticed in the general bustle. In my sleeping chamber, a woman was trying on my adornments, holding up ear ornaments to her reflection in my vanity mirror. In Richard's study, now emptied of his volumes, a man was measuring the antique desk for transport. It was in the living area that we finally encountered Lily, who was standing guard over a small stack of image collections and personal papers. Her eyes widened when she saw us, but she quickly composed her expression, giving only the slightest nod of acknowledgement. These items aren't for vending, she was explaining firmly to an insistent customer. Kin historical records. But everything has a cost, the woman argued. What if I gave you 100 for the lot? Not for vending at any cost, Lily repeated, her tone brooking no argument. I felt a surge of pride for my granddaughter's quiet strength. What's the delay here? Daniel approached, frowning at the interaction. This lady wants to purchase Grandma's personal papers and images, Lily explained. I told her they're not for vending. Daniel sighed impatiently. Lily, we discussed this. Anything we're retaining has already been removed. Everything else goes. These are her private journals, Lily protested. Her letters from Grandpa during the conflict. Her parents' citizenship papers. You can't just vend these to strangers. Fine, Daniel conceded with obvious irritation. Put them in my vehicle, but everything else is priced to move. He turned to the customer. We have some lovely initial prints in the den that might interest you instead. As Daniel led the woman away, Lily finally made eye contact with us, mouthing, "Follow me," before picking up the stack of preserved items and heading toward the kitchen. In the relative privacy of the empty storage room, Lily set down her precious cargo and embraced me carefully. Grandma, I can't believe you're here. Are you managing okay? Fine, I assured her. Needed to see with my own eyes. It's horrible, Lily whispered, tears threatening. They're vending everything, even things I know meant something special to you. I've tried to save what I could, but… You've done wonderfully, I interrupted, patting her hand. Some things, just things. Others, I gestured to the stack of collections and papers she'd protected. Those matter. Mom found the secure box in your closet, Lily continued urgently, but she couldn't open it. They're bringing someone this afternoon to drill it. David and I exchanged glances. The secure box contained the documentation we needed, the proof of the trust accounts, the arrangement with David, the conditions Richard and I had established years ago. Harold has copies, David assured me. Everything is legally protected. I inclined my head, though unease settled in my stomach. The secure box also contained personal items, letters between Richard and me that were meant for no one else's eyes. The original deed to the coastal property with Sarah's name mentioned in the transfer notes explaining our reasons. What's going on in here? Vanessa's tone cut through our whispered conversation as she appeared in the storage room doorway. Her eyes widened as she registered my presence. Mom, what the hell are you doing here? Visiting my dwelling, I replied calmly. While it's still mine. Vanessa's gaze darted to David, then back to me, comprehension dawning. You released yourself from the medical facility? Are you insane? You had a cerebrovascular incident. Physician approved, I said simply. Short visit. And you? Vanessa turned on Lily. You knew about this? You've been conspiring without our knowledge. Someone needed to look out for Grandma's interests, Lily replied, chin raised defiantly. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. Daniel, she called sharply. You need to get in here now. Within moments, Daniel appeared, stopping short at the sight of me in the mobility chair. Mom, what's occurring? Apparently, Vanessa said icily. Mom has released herself from the medical facility to spy on us with the help of her companion's son and our daughter. Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. How long have you been here? Long enough, I replied. Seen everything. Needed to see. Mom, you don't comprehend, he began, his tone conciliatory. This is all for your benefit. We're liquidating assets to pay for your extended care, the physician said. Liar, I interrupted, my tone stronger than it had been in weeks. Physician said good prognosis. You never inquired, never wanted to know. An uncomfortable silence fell over the storage room, broken only by the sounds of the ongoing disposal in the other rooms, strangers exclaiming over discoveries, cash mechanisms signaling, my life being parceled out piece by piece. I think, David said quietly. It's time we left. This has been enough excitement for one day. I inclined my head, suddenly feeling the fatigue of emotion and physical exertion. But as David turned my mobility chair, I looked back at my offspring one last time. Enjoy the disposal, I said softly. Everything has a price, even lessons about repercussions. As we left the apartment, I heard Daniel calling after us, demanding answers, explanations. but I didn't turn around. I had seen what I came to see. My offspring had shown me exactly who they were, and I had shown them in my quiet way that I was still very much alive and watching. The medical chamber felt different when I returned, less like a confinement, more like a temporary command center. Dr. Patel had been informed of my excursion, and after checking my indicators, seemed impressed rather than concerned. Your vital pressure is actually lower than before you left, he noted, reviewing the devices. Sometimes confronting our fears is better than lying here imagining the worst. Not fears. I corrected him. Realities. I negated with my head, forcing myself to breathe evenly. This was why I had come, to witness, to remember, to fuel the resolve that would carry me through what was to come. We moved through the crowded rooms, unnoticed in the general bustle. In my sleeping chamber, a woman was trying on my adornments, holding up ear ornaments to her reflection in my vanity mirror. In Richard's study, now emptied of his volumes, a man was measuring the antique desk for transport. It was in the living area that we finally encountered Lily, who was standing guard over a small stack of image collections and personal papers. Her eyes widened when she saw us, but she quickly composed her expression, giving only the slightest nod of acknowledgement. These items aren't for vending, she was explaining firmly to an insistent customer. Kin historical records. But everything has a cost, the woman argued. What if I gave you 100 for the lot? Not for vending at any cost, Lily repeated, her tone brooking no argument. I felt a surge of pride for my granddaughter's quiet strength. What's the delay here? Daniel approached, frowning at the interaction. This lady wants to purchase Grandma's personal papers and images, Lily explained. I told her they're not for vending. Daniel sighed impatiently. Lily, we discussed this. Anything we're retaining has already been removed. Everything else goes. These are her private journals, Lily protested. Her letters from Grandpa during the conflict. Her parents' citizenship papers. You can't just vend these to strangers. Fine, Daniel conceded with obvious irritation. Put them in my vehicle, but everything else is priced to move. He turned to the customer. We have some lovely initial prints in the den that might interest you instead. As Daniel led the woman away, Lily finally made eye contact with us, mouthing, "Follow me," before picking up the stack of preserved items and heading toward the kitchen. In the relative privacy of the empty storage room, Lily set down her precious cargo and embraced me carefully. Grandma, I can't believe you're here. Are you managing okay? Fine, I assured her. Needed to see with my own eyes. It's horrible, Lily whispered, tears threatening. They're vending everything, even things I know meant something special to you. I've tried to save what I could, but… You've done wonderfully, I interrupted, patting her hand. Some things, just things. Others, I gestured to the stack of collections and papers she'd protected. Those matter. Mom found the secure box in your closet, Lily continued urgently, but she couldn't open it. They're bringing someone this afternoon to drill it. David and I exchanged glances. The secure box contained the documentation we needed, the proof of the trust accounts, the arrangement with David, the conditions Richard and I had established years ago. Harold has copies, David assured me. Everything is legally protected. I inclined my head, though unease settled in my stomach. The secure box also contained personal items, letters between Richard and me that were meant for no one else's eyes. The original deed to the coastal property with Sarah's name mentioned in the transfer notes explaining our reasons. What's going on in here? Vanessa's tone cut through our whispered conversation as she appeared in the storage room doorway. Her eyes widened as she registered my presence. Mom, what the hell are you doing here? Visiting my dwelling, I replied calmly. While it's still mine. Vanessa's gaze darted to David, then back to me, comprehension dawning. You released yourself from the medical facility? Are you insane? You had a cerebrovascular incident. Physician approved, I said simply. Short visit. And you? Vanessa turned on Lily. You knew about this? You've been conspiring without our knowledge. Someone needed to look out for Grandma's interests, Lily replied, chin raised defiantly. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. Daniel, she called sharply. You need to get in here now. Within moments, Daniel appeared, stopping short at the sight of me in the mobility chair. "Mom, what's occurring?" Apparently, Vanessa said icily. "Mom has released herself from the medical facility to spy on us with the help of her companion's son and our daughter." Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough," I replied. "Seen everything. Needed to see." "Mom, you don't comprehend," he began, his tone conciliatory. "This is all for your benefit. We're liquidating assets to pay for your extended care," the physician said. "Liar," I interrupted, my tone stronger than it had been in weeks. "Physician said good prognosis. You never inquired, never wanted to know." An uncomfortable silence fell over the storage room, broken only by the sounds of the ongoing disposal in the other rooms, strangers exclaiming over discoveries, cash mechanisms signaling, my life being parceled out piece by piece. "I think," David said quietly, "it's time we left. This has been enough excitement for one day." I inclined my head, suddenly feeling the fatigue of emotion and physical exertion. But as David turned my mobility chair, I looked back at my offspring one last time. "Enjoy the disposal," I said softly. "Everything has a price, even lessons about repercussions." As we left the apartment, I heard Daniel calling after us, demanding answers, explanations. But I didn't turn around. I had seen what I came to see. My offspring had shown me exactly who they were, and I had shown them in my quiet way that I was still very much alive and watching. The medical chamber felt different when I returned, less like a confinement, more like a temporary command center. Dr. Patel had been informed of my excursion, and after checking my indicators, seemed impressed rather than concerned. "Your vital pressure is actually lower than before you left," he noted, reviewing the devices. "Sometimes confronting our fears is better than lying here imagining the worst." "Not fears," I corrected him. "Realities." He smiled sympathetically. "Well, whatever they were, facing them seems to have done you good. Your speech is markedly improved, too." After he departed, Harold arrived, his normally unflappable demeanor showing signs of strain. "They've opened the secure box," he announced without introduction. I had expected this, but the news still sent a cold ripple through me. "When?" "About an hour ago, a locksmith drilled it open." "Daniel has the contents." David, who had stepped out to get beverage, returned in time to hear this. "All of it. The trust documents, the letters." Harold inclined his head grimly. "Everything." He called me immediately, demanding an explanation. "He's on his way here now." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "Good. Time for truth." "Victoria," Harold cautioned. "He's extremely agitated. Perhaps we should postpone this confrontation until you're stronger." "No more postponing," I said firmly. "No more secrets." We didn't have long to wait. Less than 20 minutes later, Daniel burst into my room. A folder clutched in his hand, his face flushed with anger. Robert trailed behind him, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "What the hell is this?" Daniel demanded, waving the folder. "Some kind of trust that gives half your estate to this outsider. Conditions that we have to fulfill to receive our inheritance." "Were you planning to tell us any of this before we embarrassed ourselves trying to vend property that apparently isn't even ours?" I regarded my eldest son calmly. "Sitting would be better." Long conversation. He remained standing, vibrating with indignation, but Robert sank into a chair by the window, looking relieved to be off his feet. "I don't need to sit," Daniel snapped. "I need explanations. This document says the coastal property legally belongs to David Mitchell. It says our trust fund distributions are contingent on demonstrated financial responsibility and community service. It says you've been setting aside money every month for years to support him through medical school. Our kin money." "My money," I corrected gently. "My choice. Dad would never have agreed to this insanity." "Your father co-signed every document," I replied. "His idea, many of them." Daniel looked as if I'd slapped him. "That's not possible. Dad believed in kin first. Always." "Yes," I agreed. "But kin more than lineage. Sarah was my kin. David became our kin too." Robert finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Mom, why didn't you tell us all these years? Would you have understood?" I asked. The question genuine rather than accusatory. When we helped Sarah with David's college tuition, you all objected, called it waste, because he wasn't related to us. Because he needed it, I countered. Your father, and I watched you all growing entitled, taking for granted your privilege, caring more about things than people. Robert flinched visibly at this assessment. So this was some kind of test. Daniel's voice dripped with sarcasm. And apparently we failed. So you decided to give away our inheritance to teach us a lesson. Not all. I clarified. Proportional. You still receive substantial amounts. If, I emphasize the word, you fulfill conditions. Community service, financial responsibility evaluations. We're not children, Mom. Then stop acting like them. I replied simply. Robert leaned forward. These conditions, what exactly do they involve? Harold stepped in, his legal training making the complex document more accessible. Each of you would need to complete 500 hours of community service at approved organizations, demonstrate responsible financial management for a period of 18 months, and participate in philanthropic planning. This is ridiculous, Daniel sputtered. We have careers, families. We don't have time for charity work. I found time, I reminded him. Working full-time. Raising 3 offspring, still volunteered. Medical facility, reading initiative, ladies' refuge. That was different, he dismissed. You were a homemaker. You had flexibility. I felt rather than saw David stiffen behind me, but he maintained his professional composure. Daniel, Harold interjected. Regardless of how you feel about the conditions, they are legally binding. The trust was established 7 years ago with your father's full participation and consent. The documentation is extensive and clear. We'll challenge it, Daniel threatened. Improper sway, diminished capacity. Your father was leader of his enterprise when he signed. I reminded him. I was on 3 councils. Good luck proving diminished capacity. Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart clenched. What about the monthly payments to David? Those are still ongoing. I inclined my head. Until his training completes. 2 more years. Why? Robert asked, and unlike Daniel's demanding tone, his seemed genuinely confused. Why him and not any of the other people you knew? It was the first thoughtful question any of my offspring had asked, and I answered it honestly. Sarah saved my life once, I said quietly. Literal, not figurative. Pulled me from vehicle after mishap. Stayed with me medical facility 3 days. Never left my side. Richard traveling. You offspring too young to remember. This was clearly news to both of them. When she got sick, promised I'd do same for her, I continued. Malignancy took her, but I could still help her son. Keep my promise. Robert absorbed this silently while Daniel paced the small room. And the coastal property? Robert finally asked. Why give him that specifically? Sarah loved it there, I explained. Last place she was happy. David spent summers nearby as child. Richard and I decided right thing, give David security. Let him focus becoming doctor like his father. You could have just set up a normal trust for him, Daniel argued. Not given away our kin vacation residence. Not really kin residence, I pointed out. You visited twice in 5 years. Too busy working, traveling. Only Lily came regularly with me. Another uncomfortable truth they couldn't refute. What about the apartment? Daniel demanded. Is that even yours to vend, or have you given that away too? Apartment is mine, I confirmed. But proceeds not yours to spend. Medical trust established for my care. Daniel laughed bitterly. Of course, you've thought of everything, haven't you? Controlled everything from your medical bed while we've been running ourselves ragged trying to manage your affairs. Affairs didn't need managing, I said calmly. I wasn't dying. Wasn't incapacitated permanently. You assumed. Never asked doctors. Never asked me. The truth of this hung in the air between us. Robert stood suddenly. I need some time to process this. He turned to Harold. The property disposal. What happens to that money? It must be placed in holding, Harold replied. Since the disposal was conducted without proper authorization, the funds cannot be distributed until Mrs. Sullivan provides written consent. Of course, Daniel muttered. More control. He turned to leave, the folder still clutched in his hand, but paused at the door. This isn't over, Mom. You can't manipulate us like this. We're not charity cases. You can reform with your conditions and your tests. After they left, the room fell silent, except for the steady beep of devices. David sighed heavily. That went about as well as expected, he observed. Better than I feared, I replied. Robert listened, actually heard some of it. Harold gathered his portfolio. I'll file the paperwork confirming your competency tomorrow. Once that's done, you'll regain full control of your accounts and medical decisions. After he left, David pulled a chair closer to my bed. Are you really okay? That was intense. I inclined my head, feeling a strange sense of relief despite the confrontation. Truth finally out. No more pretending. They're still vending your things, he reminded me gently. Just things, I replied, surprising myself with how little it suddenly mattered. What's important preserved? I patted his hand. Sarah would be so proud of you. His eyes brightened with unshed tears. I hope so. I'm trying to live up to her example and yours. As evening settled over the medical facility, I found myself thinking not of what I had lost that day, but what had been revealed. The true character of my offspring, the strength of my granddaughter, the fulfillment of a promise made long ago. The coastal property was safe. David's future was secure. And my offspring faced a choice that would reveal once and for all what they truly valued. The confrontation has begun. Will Victoria's offspring accept the terms of their succession or fight against their mother's wishes? What other revelations await this fractured kin? Subscribe now for the next chapter of this compelling story about vows, disloyalty, and the true meaning of heritage. Sunday brought an unexpected visitor. I was finishing my morning rehabilitation when Robert appeared in the doorway alone and bearing a small potted flower. Mom, he greeted me, awkwardly hovering at the threshold. Is this a good time? I inclined my head, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. Jenny, my therapist, gave me an encouraging smile as she gathered her equipment. You're making wonderful progress, Mrs. Sullivan, she said. Keep practicing those exercises, and we might discuss release planning by the end of the week. After she left, Robert placed the flower on my bedside table. It's from your apartment, he admitted. I rescued it before it could be vended. I remember Dad gave it to you for your anniversary. The simple gesture caught me off guard. Of all the possessions being liquidated, he had thought to save a living thing that required care and attention. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. Very thoughtful. Robert sat, looking more like the boy I remembered than the man who had stood silently by while his siblings divided my possessions. Mom, I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday, about Sarah, about David, about the conditions in the trust. I waited, giving him space to continue. I looked up some old kin images last night, he said. Found one from my 10th birthday. Sarah was there helping you serve cake. I'd completely forgotten she was part of those moments. She was always there. I confirmed. For every important day. When you broke your arm, she drove us to emergency. When Vanessa had illness, she stayed nights helping me care for all of you. Robert inclined his head slowly. I don't remember much of that. I guess kids don't notice the adults who make their lives possible. Natural, I assured him. Children self-centered by nature, but adults should grow beyond that. He winced slightly at the gentle rebuke. I'm trying to understand, Mom. The coastal property, the trust conditions, all of it. Daniel's furious, talking about legal advisors and challenges. Vanessa's not speaking to anyone. But I keep thinking about what you said, that we never even asked about your prognosis, and you're right. We just assumed the worst and started distributing your life. The admission hung between us, honest and painful. Why? I asked simply. Why assume I was done? Robert looked down at his hands. I don't know. It's terrible to say out loud. I think it was easier to think of you as already gone to not have to face what we were doing. His honesty was startling and healing in its way. The trust conditions, he continued, 500 hours of community service. That's what, 12 weeks full-time or a year of weekends approximately. I agreed. Not impossible. No, he conceded. Not impossible at all. He hesitated. I called the community center near my house this morning. They need help with their reading initiative. I signed up for orientation next Saturday. Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. Robert. I'm not saying I agree with everything, he added quickly. The coastal property still feels like it should have been discussed with us, but the conditions. Maybe Dad and you were right. Maybe we have lost sight of certain values. Privilege easy to take for granted, I said softly. Your father and I worried. Worked so hard give you opportunities, but perhaps made it too easy. Daniel doesn't see it that way, Robert warned. He's convinced you've been manipulated by David, by Harold, by anyone except your own judgment. He's determined to break the trust. His choice, I replied. Repercussions also his. We talked for nearly an hour, the longest real conversation I'd had with my youngest son in years. He asked about Sarah, about our companionship, about the promises we'd made to each other. For the first time, he seemed genuinely interested in my life as something more than an extension of his childhood. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated. Mom, there's something else you should know. Daniel found some papers in your secure box. Investment records, account digits. He's been making calls trying to access those funds. My heart sank. Without authorization? Robert inclined his head uncomfortably. He's convinced himself it's for your benefit, for your care, but using my money without permission is theft, I finished for him. Even from one's mother. I told him as much, Robert admitted. That's partly why he's not speaking to me either. After he left, I called Harold immediately, alerting him to Daniel's activities. His response was swift and decisive. Additional security measures on all accounts. Notifications to the financial institutions. Acceleration of the competency filing. It will be handled by end of business tomorrow. Harold assured me. He won't be able to access anything. I thanked him, then sat in the quiet of my medical chamber, contemplating the fractures in my kin that seemed to be widening rather than healing. Daniel, desperate to seize control. Vanessa retreating into silent resentment. Robert hesitantly reaching toward understanding. In the afternoon, Lily arrived with David, both carrying beverage and wearing expressions that suggested news. Grandma, Lily began immediately. Uncle Daniel came to our house this morning. He tried to convince Mom that you're being manipulated by David, that he's after your money. Vanessa's response? I asked. She actually defended you, Lily said, sounding surprised herself. She told him that whatever your reasons, they were your choice to make. That vending your things while you were hospitalized was wrong, even if they thought it was for your benefit. This was unexpected. Vanessa, of all people, drawing a line. She's still upset, Lily clarified, seeing my expression. But I think seeing you at the property disposal, realizing you were aware and watching them, it affected her. What about the apartment? Daniel demanded. Is that even yours to vend, or have you given that away too? Apartment is mine, I confirmed. But proceeds not yours to spend. Medical trust established for my care. Daniel laughed bitterly. Of course, you've thought of everything, haven't you? Controlled everything from your medical bed while we've been running ourselves ragged trying to manage your affairs. Affairs didn't need managing, I said calmly. I wasn't dying. Wasn't incapacitated permanently. You assumed. Never asked doctors. Never asked me. The truth of this hung in the air between us. Robert stood suddenly. I need some time to process this. He turned to Harold. The property disposal. What happens to that money? It must be placed in holding, Harold replied. Since the disposal was conducted without proper authorization, the funds cannot be distributed until Mrs. Sullivan provides written consent. Of course, Daniel muttered. More control. He turned to leave, the folder still clutched in his hand, but paused at the door. This isn't over, Mom. You can't manipulate us like this. We're not charity cases. You can reform with your conditions and your tests. After they left, the room fell silent, except for the steady beep of devices. David sighed heavily. That went about as well as expected, he observed. Better than I feared, I replied. Robert listened, actually heard some of it. Harold gathered his portfolio. I'll file the paperwork confirming your competency tomorrow. Once that's done, you'll regain full control of your accounts and medical decisions. After he left, David pulled a chair closer to my bed. Are you really okay? That was intense. I inclined my head, feeling a strange sense of relief despite the confrontation. Truth finally out. No more pretending. They're still vending your things, he reminded me gently. Just things, I replied, surprising myself with how little it suddenly mattered. What's important preserved? I patted his hand. Sarah would be so proud of you. His eyes brightened with unshed tears. I hope so. I'm trying to live up to her example and yours. As evening settled over the medical facility, I found myself thinking not of what I had lost that day, but what had been revealed. The true character of my offspring, the strength of my granddaughter, the fulfillment of a promise made long ago. The coastal property was safe. David's future was secure. And my offspring faced a choice that would reveal once and for all what they truly valued. The confrontation has begun. Will Victoria's offspring accept the terms of their succession or fight against their mother's wishes? What other revelations await this fractured kin? Subscribe now for the next chapter of this compelling story about vows, disloyalty, and the true meaning of heritage. Sunday brought an unexpected visitor. I was finishing my morning rehabilitation when Robert appeared in the doorway alone and bearing a small potted flower. "Mom," he greeted me, awkwardly hovering at the threshold. "Is this a good time?" I inclined my head, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. Jenny, my therapist, gave me an encouraging smile as she gathered her equipment. "You're making wonderful progress, Mrs. Sullivan," she said. "Keep practicing those exercises, and we might discuss release planning by the end of the week." After she left, Robert placed the flower on my bedside table. "It's from your apartment," he admitted. "I rescued it before it could be vended. I remember Dad gave it to you for your anniversary." The simple gesture caught me off guard. Of all the possessions being liquidated, he had thought to save a living thing that required care and attention. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "Very thoughtful." Robert sat, looking more like the boy I remembered than the man who had stood silently by while his siblings divided my possessions. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday, about Sarah, about David, about the conditions in the trust." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I looked up some old kin images last night," he said. "Found one from my 10th birthday. Sarah was there helping you serve cake." I'd completely forgotten she was part of those moments. She was always there. I confirmed. "For every important day. When you broke your arm, she drove us to emergency. When Vanessa had illness, she stayed nights helping me care for all of you." Robert inclined his head slowly. "I don't remember much of that. I guess kids don't notice the adults who make their lives possible." "Natural," I assured him. "Children self-centered by nature, but adults should grow beyond that." He winced slightly at the gentle rebuke. "I'm trying to understand, Mom. The coastal property, the trust conditions, all of it." Daniel's furious, talking about legal advisors and challenges. "Vanessa's not speaking to anyone. But I keep thinking about what you said, that we never even asked about your prognosis, and you're right. We just assumed the worst and started distributing your life." The admission hung between us, honest and painful. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why assume I was done?" Robert looked down at his hands. "I don't know. It's terrible to say out loud. I think it was easier to think of you as already gone to not have to face what we were doing." His honesty was startling and healing in its way. "The trust conditions," he continued, 500 hours of community service. That's what, 12 weeks full-time or a year of weekends approximately." I agreed. "Not impossible." "No," he conceded. "Not impossible at all." He hesitated. "I called the community center near my house this morning. They need help with their reading initiative. I signed up for orientation next Saturday." Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. "Robert, I'm not saying I agree with everything," he added quickly. "The coastal property still feels like it should have been discussed with us, but the conditions. Maybe Dad and you were right. Maybe we have lost sight of certain values." "Privilege easy to take for granted," I said softly. "Your father and I worried. Worked so hard give you opportunities, but perhaps made it too easy." "Daniel doesn't see it that way," Robert warned. "He's convinced you've been manipulated by David, by Harold, by anyone except your own judgment. He's determined to break the trust." "His choice," I replied. "Repercussions also his." We talked for nearly an hour, the longest real conversation I'd had with my youngest son in years. He asked about Sarah, about our companionship, about the promises we'd made to each other. For the first time, he seemed genuinely interested in my life as something more than an extension of his childhood. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated. "Mom, there's something else you should know. Daniel found some papers in your secure box. Investment records, account digits. He's been making calls trying to access those funds." My heart sank. "Without authorization?" Robert inclined his head uncomfortably. "He's convinced himself it's for your benefit, for your care, but using my money without permission is theft," I finished for him. "Even from one's mother." "I told him as much," Robert admitted. "That's partly why he's not speaking to me either." After he left, I called Harold immediately, alerting him to Daniel's activities. His response was swift and decisive. Additional security measures on all accounts. Notifications to the financial institutions. Acceleration of the competency filing. It will be handled by end of business tomorrow. Harold assured me. He won't be able to access anything. I thanked him, then sat in the quiet of my medical chamber, contemplating the fractures in my kin that seemed to be widening rather than healing. Daniel, desperate to seize control. Vanessa retreating into silent resentment. Robert hesitantly reaching toward understanding. In the afternoon, Lily arrived with David, both carrying beverage and wearing expressions that suggested news. "Grandma," Lily began immediately. "Uncle Daniel came to our house this morning. He tried to convince Mom that you're being manipulated by David, that he's after your money." "Vanessa's response?" I asked. "She actually defended you," Lily said, sounding surprised herself. "She told him that whatever your reasons, they were your choice to make. That vending your things while you were hospitalized was wrong, even if they thought it was for your benefit." This was unexpected. Vanessa, of all people, drawing a line. "She's still upset," Lily clarified, seeing my expression. "But I think seeing you at the property disposal, realizing you were aware and watching them, it affected her." "And there's more," David added. "Daniel apparently contacted the medical facility administration trying to suggest I've been unduly influencing you, that I shouldn't be allowed to visit because I'm not kin." "Ridiculous," I said firmly. "Dr. Patel shut it down completely," David continued. "He informed Daniel that as your physician, he's observed no cognitive impairment that would make you susceptible to influence, and that you've made your wishes regarding visitors very clear." I made a mental note to thank Dr. Patel for his support. "Also," Lily added, glancing at David, "I've been talking with David about health education, about what it takes, the commitment involved. It's helping me decide if it's really the path I want." And I prompted, noticing the light in her eyes. "I think it is," she said with quiet determination. "I want to help people, make a difference like David is doing, like you did with your volunteer work." Pride swelled in my chest, not just at her ambition, but at her reasons. Not money or status, but service and purpose. "Your mother knows?" I asked. Lily inclined her head. "I told her last night. She was surprisingly supportive. Said if that's what I really want, she'll help me prepare for the exam next year." Another small shift, another unexpected response. Perhaps the earthquake of revelations was rearranging more than just property rights. As we talked through the afternoon, a plan began to form in my mind. The divisions in my kin would not heal overnight, might never fully mend, but perhaps there was a way forward that acknowledged both the pain and the possibility of growth. "David," I said as they prepared to leave, "I need one more favor. When I'm released, want to visit coastal property. See it one more time." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "It's still your residence, too, Victoria." The lifelong utilization rights were very clear in the agreement. "Not just visit," I clarified. "Want kin meeting there." "All of them." David and Lily exchanged glances. "Are you sure that's wise?" David asked gently. "Daniel's actions suggest he's escalating, not calming down." "Necessary," I insisted. Final clash. All details revealed. As they left, I turned to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow would bring release planning, the formal restoration of my legal competency, the first steps toward reclaiming my independence, but the true healing of my kin, of old wounds and new betrayals. That would require more than legal documents and medical clearances. That would require courage, honesty, and perhaps a setting that reminded us all of what really mattered. The coastal property waited, its windows facing the endless horizon, its walls holding decades of memories, both joyful and painful. The perfect place for endings and beginnings. 5 days later, I stood on my own 2 feet at the medical entrance, leaning only slightly on a support stick as David brought his vehicle around. Dr. Patel had pronounced my recuperation remarkable and cleared me for release with outpatient therapy 3 times weekly. Remember to pace yourself, he cautioned, reviewing my medication schedule one final time. You've made extraordinary progress, but cerebrovascular incident recuperation is a long race, not a quick dash. Understood, I assured him. No long races for now. He smiled, shaking my hand warmly. It's been a privilege, Mrs. Sullivan. You've reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. As David helped me into the passenger seat, I took a deep breath of fresh air. My first taste of true freedom in nearly a month. The world seemed sharper somehow, colors more vibrant, sounds more distinct. Perhaps it was simply the contrast with the sterile medical environment. Or perhaps it was the heightened awareness that comes with nearly losing everything. Where to? David asked, sliding behind the wheel. Coastal property, I replied without hesitation. Called ahead. Harold meeting us there. Lily too. And your offspring? He asked carefully. Invited all 3. Don't know who will come. The drive to Malibu took nearly an hour in midday traffic. I spent it watching the familiar landscape pass by, marveling at how simultaneously unchanged and different everything seemed. The cerebrovascular incident had altered more than my body. It had shifted my perspective, clarified priorities I hadn't examined in years. As we turned onto the coastal highway, the ocean came into view. Endless blue stretching to the horizon, waves crashing against rocky shores. I felt my shoulders relax. Tension I hadn't realized I was carrying slowly dissipating. I forget sometimes, David said, noticing my expression. How beautiful it is here. Boston has its charms, but this, he gestured toward the panoramic vista. Why Sarah loved it, I agreed. Healing place. We rounded the final curve, and there it stood, the coastal property. 2 stories of weathered wood and glass perched on the bluff, its wide platform extending toward the ocean like an outstretched hand. So many memories lived within those walls. Richard teaching the offspring to play strategy games on rainy afternoons. Sarah and I sharing drink and secrets on the platform at sunset. Lily building sand structures with her grandfather on the private shore below. And now, parked in the circular drive, 3 vehicles waited. Harold's sensible car, Lily's compact, and, to my surprise, both Robert's large vehicle and Vanessa's premium coupe. Only Daniel's vehicle was missing. All but one, I murmured. David inclined his head. Are you ready for this? As I'll ever be. He helped me from the vehicle and up the wooden steps to the platform. The front entrance stood open, sea air carrying voices from within, some tense, others conciliatory. Lily spotted us first, rushing to embrace me carefully. Grandma, you look so much better. Feel better, I assured her, returning the hug. The others turned at our entrance. Harold inclined his head in greeting. Robert stood awkwardly by the fireplace, and Vanessa, surprisingly, approached to offer a stiff but seemingly genuine kiss on my cheek. You should have told us you were being released today, she said, her tone more concerned than accusatory. We would have helped. Needed to do this my way, I explained. On my terms. Yes, Vanessa replied with unexpected insight. I'm beginning to understand that about you. I moved slowly to my favorite armchair by the large window, settling into its familiar embrace. From this vantage point, I could see everyone in the living room while gazing out at the ocean beyond, a position of both connection and perspective. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice stronger each day with therapy. Especially here of all places. Daniel refused, Robert said bluntly. Said he wouldn't participate in, quote, the charade of manipulation and theft. He's meeting with another legal advisor today. I inclined my head, unsurprised, but disappointed nonetheless. His choice. But I'm glad the rest of you came. Why here, Mom? Vanessa asked, perching on the sofa's edge. Why bring us to the very residence you gave away? Because this residence holds truth, I replied simply. About kin, about vows, about what really matters. I gestured to Harold, who opened his portfolio and removed a folder. Before we begin, legal matters first. My competency officially established. Control of all accounts returned to me. Property disposal proceeds in holding until I determine their distribution. Vanessa and Robert exchanged glances, but didn't object. Now, I continued, I want to tell you a story about Sarah, about this residence, about why it belongs to David. For the next half hour, I spoke more than I had since the cerebrovascular incident, recounting the 40-year companionship that my offspring had witnessed, but never truly understood. How Sarah had stood by me through Richard's service deployment, through losses and health scares, through the challenging years of raising 3 strong-willed offspring. How I had supported her through separation, single parenthood, and finally the devastating malignancy diagnosis. When Sarah knew she was dying, I explained, her greatest fear wasn't death itself. It was leaving David without support. His father long gone. No siblings, no extended kin. She asked you to look after him, Robert guessed, his expression thoughtful. Yes, but more than that, she asked me to help him become the physician he dreamed of being, like his father. A dream that required years of education, expensive education. So you helped with tuition. Vanessa acknowledged. We knew that part. What we didn't understand was why this level of commitment to someone outside our kin. Because Sarah was kin, I said firmly. Different kind, but no less real. She saved my life once. Literally pulled me from burning vehicle after mishap. Stayed by my side medical facility 3 days straight. I could see this revelation landing differently now than it had with Daniel and Robert earlier. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. Richard and I decided coastal property would provide security, allow David focus on medical training, not financial stress. His name on deed meant he could borrow against it if needed. But we retained lifelong utilization rights. Nothing really changed except paper ownership. Except everything changed, Vanessa pointed out. Because you never told us. You let us believe it would be ours someday. Fair criticism, I acknowledged. Perhaps should have been more transparent. But your reactions to helping with tuition didn't inspire confidence. You called it waste of kin resources. No one could deny this truth. The trust conditions, Robert interjected. The community service requirements. Why structure our succession that way? I turned to him with appreciation for the direct question. Because money without purpose or perspective can damage as easily as help. Your father and I wanted more for you than just financial security. Wanted you to experience giving back, finding meaning beyond possessions. I've started, Robert said quietly. The reading initiative. It's actually rewarding. Helping adults learn to read, seeing their progress. I didn't expect to enjoy it. Pride warmed my chest at this small but significant step. I looked into the Ladies' Refuge program, Vanessa admitted unexpectedly. The one you volunteered with for years. They need help with their financial education workshops, teaching budgeting, credit management. I thought maybe my skills could be useful there. The surprise must have shown on my face because she added defensively. I'm not saying I agree with all of this, but I'm considering the conditions, testing the waters. It was more than I had dared hope for. David, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. I want you all to know something. When your mother conveyed the coastal property to me, it came with her own conditions, that it remain available to your kin. That any significant decisions about its use or potential vending would include consultation with all of you. She never intended to cut you out of this place or its memories. Is that true? Robert asked me directly. I inclined my head. This residence meant for happiness, for healing, for bringing people together, not driving them apart. As if to emphasize my words, the setting sun broke through cloud cover, sending golden light streaming through the windows, illuminating the room in a warm glow. For a moment, we all sat in silence, absorbing the beauty and perhaps, I hoped, the deeper meaning of this place that had become the center of our conflict. I miss Dad, Vanessa said suddenly, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Being here, I can almost feel him. His presence. Me too, Robert agreed softly. He would be so proud of you both, I told them. for being here, for listening, for trying to understand. The moment of connection was fragile but real. A tentative bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. Not complete, not with Daniel's absence and the wounds still fresh, but a beginning. Outside, waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, reminding us that some things remained constant, even as others changed forever. The peace of our kin gathering shattered with the sound of tires on gravel. Through the front windows, we watched Daniel's luxury vehicle skid to a stop in the circular drive. His movements jerky with anger as he slammed the vehicle door and strode toward the residence. "This should be interesting," Vanessa murmured, straightening as if preparing for battle. I gripped my support stick tighter. Let him speak. Hear him out. Daniel burst through the open doorway, his eyes darting from face to face before settling on me with laser focus. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, voice tight with controlled fury. "The whole kin gathered at our coastal property." Oh wait, not our coastal property anymore. Mom gave it away to a stranger. "Daniel," Robert began. "If you just listen." "I've heard enough." Daniel cut him off. "While you've all been sitting here getting manipulated, I've been doing actual research." He brandished a folder similar to the one Harold had brought. "Found some very interesting things about the timing of this property transfer." He approached, towering over my seated figure. The coastal property was transferred to David Mitchell 8 years ago, just months after Dad's first malignancy diagnosis. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? When he was vulnerable, when you both knew he might not survive. A cold silence fell over the room. Even Vanessa looked shocked at the accusation. "That's enough," David said quietly, stepping forward. "You're upset, I understand, but that crosses a line." "Stay out of this," Daniel snapped. "You're the beneficiary of all this manipulation. Of course you'd defend it." I raised my hand, silencing further interruptions. "Let him finish." "Say your piece, Daniel." He seemed momentarily thrown by my calm acceptance, but quickly recovered. "The trust conditions, the property transfer, all of it happened when Dad was sick, when he wasn't thinking clearly, when you were making decisions for both of you. The legal advisor I spoke with today says we have grounds to challenge everything based on Dad's diminished capacity at the time." Harold stirred from his corner. "That would be extremely difficult to prove given the extensive documentation and multiple witnesses to Richard's competency at the time of signing." "We'll see about that," Daniel retorted. "And there's more. I've been going through financial records. Mom has been sending money to David monthly for years. Thousands of dollars diverted from our kin's resources." "My resources," I corrected quietly. "My choice." "Dad would never have approved," Daniel insisted. "Not of giving away a kin property, not of these ridiculous conditions on our succession." I studied my eldest son, the tight line of his jaw, the defensive posture, the absolute certainty in his eyes. In many ways, he reminded me of myself at his age, stubborn, convinced of my own righteousness, unable to see beyond my narrow perspective. "Sit down, Daniel," I said, my voice surprisingly strong and steady. "There's something you need to see." He hesitated, then grudgingly took a seat across from me, as far from David as possible. I nodded to Harold, who removed a sealed envelope from his portfolio and handed it to me. "I was saving this for last resort, hoped we wouldn't need it." With slightly trembling fingers, I broke the seal and removed a disc in a clear case. "Richard made this 6 months before he died, asked me to keep it unless absolutely necessary." "What is it?" Robert asked. "Your father's speaking directly to you about all of this." Daniel scoffed. "Convenient. Another fabrication to support your story." "Let's watch it," Vanessa suggested, her voice neutral. "If it's Dad, we'll know." Harold set up his portable computer on the coffee table, inserting the disc. After a moment of loading, Richard's face appeared on the screen, thinner than in his healthy days, but clear-eyed and alert, sitting in his study at home. "Hello, children," he began, his familiar voice filling the room. "If you're watching this, it means your mother has felt it necessary to share some difficult truths with you. I had hoped this recording would never be needed, that you would accept her decisions with grace and understanding. But knowing you as I do," a wry smile crossed his face, "I suspected you might need to hear this directly from me." Daniel leaned forward despite himself, eyes fixed on his father's image. "First, let me be absolutely clear," Richard continued. "Every decision regarding our estate planning, the coastal property transfer to David Mitchell, the trust conditions, all of it was done with my full knowledge, participation, and enthusiastic support. In fact, many of these ideas were mine originally." He shifted in his chair, expression growing more serious. "I've watched with increasing concern as you've grown into adulthood. You've achieved professional success, financial stability, all the things your mother and I hoped for you. But somewhere along the way, something essential seems to have been lost. The values we tried to instill, compassion, generosity, perspective, have been overshadowed by materialism and entitlement." Daniel's face flushed, but he remained silent. The coastal property decision came after much thought. Sarah Mitchell was kin to us in all but lineage. When she faced her own malignancy battle, your mother and I promised to see David through his education. The property transfer provided him security while ensuring he could focus on becoming the doctor he was meant to be. It was the right thing to do both practically and morally. Richard leaned closer to the camera. "As for the trust conditions, consider them a final lesson from your father. Money without purpose destroys more lives than it enhances. I've seen it happen throughout my career. Inherited wealth without responsibility or perspective leading to emptiness and dysfunction. I want better for you." His expression softened. "I love you all more than you can know. This isn't punishment. It's protection. The greatest gift I can give you isn't financial security, but the opportunity to discover what truly matters. Your mother has honored my wishes perfectly. Any anger you feel should be directed at me, not her." The recording ended with Richard's gentle smile, frozen on the screen for a moment before fading to black. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. Daniel stood abruptly, walking to the window with his back to the room. His shoulders were rigid, hands clenched at his sides. Robert wiped moisture from his eyes. That was hard to watch, but it was Dad. Unmistakably Dad. Every word, every mannerism. Vanessa agreed quietly. No one could fake that. I watched Daniel through the window, standing at the platform railing, facing the ocean as darkness began to fall. His posture spoke of conflict, of a worldview being forcibly realigned. "Give him time," I suggested. Hardest for him to accept. Most invested in his version of events. "Why is he so resistant?" Lily asked, speaking up for the first time since Daniel's arrival. "Uncle Robert and Mom are at least trying to understand." "Pride," David offered thoughtfully, speaking as someone who's seen this in patients' families. "Sometimes the person who reacts most strongly is the one who recognizes themselves most clearly in the criticism." I inclined my head slowly. Daniel always most like Richard. Same drive, same certainty. Being wrong difficult for both. As the last light faded from the sky, Daniel remained on the platform, a solitary figure against the darkening horizon. Inside, conversation continued more quietly, with Robert asking David about his medical training, Vanessa examining old photo collections with Lily, Harold discussing legal details with me. A fragile normality had descended, broken only when Daniel finally re-entered, his face composed, but eyes revealing inner turmoil. "I need to head back to the city," he announced stiffly. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Daniel," I began. "We should talk." "Not now, Mom," he interrupted, but without his earlier hostility. "I need time to think." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. Something had shifted, however slightly. As he prepared to leave, he paused by David's chair. "For what it's worth, my father was a good judge of character. If he approved of you, there must be substance there." It wasn't an apology, but from Daniel, it was a significant concession. After he left, the atmosphere lightened noticeably. Vanessa suggested ordering dinner, and to my surprise, everyone agreed to stay. As night fully claimed the sky, the coastal property lights glowed warmly against the darkness. Voices and occasional laughter spilling from its windows. Not quite the kin harmony of years past, but something healing nonetheless. Later, As David helped me to the master sleeping chamber I'd shared with Richard for so many summers, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Not victory. There were no winners or losers in this kin reckoning, but progress towards something true and necessary. Do you think he'll come around? David asked, turning down the bed with the practiced efficiency of a doctor. Daniel eventually, I replied. On his own terms in his own time. And if he doesn't, if he pursues legal challenges. I smiled slightly. Then we face that too. Kin complicated. Healing not linear. As I settled against the pillows listening to the eternal rhythm of waves below, I thought of Richard, of Sarah, of vows kept and lessons learned. The coastal property stood as it always had, bearing witness to both our best and worst moments. A sanctuary not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The confrontation with Daniel brings painful truths and uncertain reconciliation. As Victoria settles back into the coastal property, what final revelations await this kin's journey? Will Daniel choose healing or continued conflict? The story approaches its emotional conclusion in the next chapter. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. 6 months passed with the steady rhythm of seasons changing. My recuperation continued. Rehabilitation twice weekly. Speech almost completely restored. The support stick relegated to a corner most days. The coastal property became my primary dwelling. Its peaceful surroundings more conducive to healing than my city apartment. Life settled into new patterns. Robert visited most weekends, often bringing his offspring, who delighted in rediscovering the shore their father had loved as a boy. Vanessa came less frequently, but with growing ease, sometimes staying overnight. Our conversations gradually moving beyond pleasantries to something approaching genuine connection. Daniel remained distant, communicating primarily through brief emails and occasional phone calls. He had abandoned his legal challenges after consulting multiple attorneys, all of whom confirmed the solidity of our estate planning. A standoff of sorts had been established, not warm, but no longer openly hostile. Lily became a regular fixture, spending every other weekend at the coastal property, often bringing textbooks to study for her entrance exam preparations. To my delight, she and David had developed a mentor relationship that benefited them both. Her providing connection to the kin that had once rejected him offering guidance through the challenging pre-health journey. On a bright October morning, almost exactly 1 year after my cerebrovascular incident, I sat on the platform watching dolphins play in the distance, a light breeze carrying the salt scent of ocean. The doorbell rang and I rose to answer it, surprised to find Daniel standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mom," he greeted me formally. "Is this a good time?" "Always," I replied, stepping back to welcome him. "Coffee?" He inclined his head, following me to the kitchen where I moved with comfortable familiarity. Preparing 2 cups, we carried them to the platform in silence, settling into adjacent chairs facing the ocean. "You're looking well," he observed after a moment. "Almost back to normal." "Better than normal," I corrected gently. "Stronger in many ways." He inclined his head, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year about Dad, about the trust conditions, about my reaction to everything." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I started the community service hours," he said finally. "At a financial education program for low-income families, teaching budgeting, investment basics, retirement planning." Surprise and pleasure warmed me. "That's wonderful, Daniel." "It's not what I expected," he admitted. "These people, they work so hard with so little. Knowledge most of us take for granted. How credit works, how to build savings. It's transformative for them. I'm seeing real changes in their lives. Giving back changes the giver too," I observed. He inclined his head slowly. "Dad was right about perspective, about what matters." He turned to face me directly. "I'm sorry, Mom, for how I behaved during your illness, for what we tried to do with your things. It was inexcusable." The apology, so long awaited, was offered simply and directly. Daniel's way. "Forgiven," I replied with equal simplicity. "Kin imperfect. All of us." "I met David last week," he continued, surprising me further. "Asked him to lunch. Wanted to know about his work, his plans for the future." And? He's impressive, Daniel acknowledged. Dedicated. I can see why Dad approved of him. Why you do? Coming from Daniel, this was high praise indeed. The coastal property, he said, gesturing to our surroundings. I understand now why it belongs to him, what it represents. Part of Sarah's heritage, I agreed. And now part of ours too. We sat in comfortable silence, watching pelicans dive for fish in the rolling waves. Something had healed between us. Not completely, perhaps never completely, but significantly. I have news, Daniel said eventually. 2 pieces, actually. Oh? First, I've accepted a board position with the Financial Education Foundation. It means cutting back at the firm, but it feels right. I reached over to squeeze his hand. 2 moved for words. Second, he continued. Amanda and I are expecting a girl. Due in February. Joy bloomed in my chest. Daniel, that's wonderful. A small smile softened his features. We're thinking of naming her Sarah. If that would be all right with you. Tears sprang to my eyes, unexpected and welcome. More than all right. Perfect. When he left that afternoon, our goodbye held none of the tension of recent months. Instead, there was a tentative warmth, a bridge being carefully rebuilt. 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn day, I hosted a gathering at the coastal property, not just kin this time, but a purposeful expansion of our circle. David was there, of course, along with Lily, Robert and his offspring, Vanessa, and even Daniel with his wife. But also present were members of the foundation where Daniel volunteered, colleagues from David's medical facility, students from Lily's pre-health program. As twilight approached, I clinked my glass for attention. The conversations quieted as everyone turned expectantly. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice clear and strong. This gathering marks something special. Today, we're officially launching the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Medical Education. David's expression registered surprise. We had discussed the concept, but not the timing or name. This foundation, I continued, will provide scholarships for promising students pursuing medical careers, with priority given to those who've lost parents or faced similar hardships. Initial funding comes from me, but I'm pleased to announce that all 3 of my offspring have chosen to contribute as well. I nodded to Daniel, Vanessa, and Robert, who each raised their glasses in acknowledgement. David Mitchell will serve as the foundation's first director, with my granddaughter Lily as program coordinator while she completes her pre-medical studies. Applause rippled through the gathering as David stepped forward, visibly moved. I'm overwhelmed, he admitted. Victoria, this honors my mother's memory in the most meaningful way possible, helping others follow the path she encouraged me to take. He paused, composing himself. Thank you isn't adequate, but it's all I have. As the celebration continued into evening, with lights strung across the platform and laughter carrying on the ocean breeze, I found a quiet moment to slip away to the shore. The sand was cool beneath my feet as I walked toward the water's edge, where waves gently erased footprints with each advancing tide. I thought of Richard, of Sarah, of vows made and kept. Of a cerebrovascular incident that could have ended everything, but instead had clarified what truly mattered. Of offspring who had disappointed me deeply and then, in their different ways, found paths toward redemption. The coastal property stood illuminated on the bluff above, windows glowing with warmth and life. Not my residence anymore, not legally, but still home in all the ways that counted. Its ownership had caused such pain and division. Yet now it had become a gathering place for healing and new beginnings. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find all 3 of my offspring approaching across the sand. Mom, everyone's asking for you, Vanessa said, reaching me first. David wants to make some kind of toast. Just needed a moment, I explained. To appreciate everything. Daniel gestured toward the residence. You've created quite a heritage up there. Not the one we expected perhaps, but meaningful. Not my heritage, I corrected gently. Ours. All of us. Including Sarah. Including Richard. Robert offered his arm as we turned back toward the residence. Dad would be proud tonight. Of all of us, I think. As we walked together along the shore, the tide washing away our footprints behind us, I felt a sense of completion. not perfection. Life offered no such guarantees, but something equally valuable: authenticity, connection, purpose. The succession my offspring had once so desperately sought to claim had been transformed into something far more valuable than property or bank accounts. They were learning, in their individual ways, what Richard and I had hoped to teach them all along. That true heritage lies not in what we possess, but in what we give. Not in what we claim as ours, but in what we create together. And that some vows, once made, reshape not just our lives, but the lives of generations to follow. A ripple effect of compassion and commitment that no disloyalty could ultimately diminish. As this story of kin disloyalty and redemption concludes, we're reminded that true succession isn't found in possessions, but in the values we choose to carry forward. Victoria's journey from medical bed to healing has transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Thank you for following this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful tale of kin, forgiveness, and finding what truly matters.